Businesses thrive by knowing customer insights because today's insights are tomorrow's facts. At iResearch, we live and breathe insights. And despite searching high and low, we were unable to find a customer insights podcast that answers one of the most important questions in business. Why do customers do what they do? So we launched one. Hi, I'm your host, Darshan Mehta. I'd like to introduce Phil Irvine. He is Vice President of Audience Intelligence at RPA, a modern ad agency with a timeless perspective, people first. Has a collective of specialists with deep benches of talent in nearly every discipline a modern marketer needs today. Phil has ownership of the audience intelligence practice for the agency, building out the vision and merchandising for the group's services internally and externally to clients. He is a marketing executive with vast experience from a brand and agency perspective. He is also the host of Clear the Air with RPA podcast. Welcome, Phil. How are you?
Oh, very good. Thanks, Darshan. Thanks for having me on your show here.
Pleasure to have you. So let's get started with your post-MBA career and strategy. And tell me some of the aha moments that led you into marketing and advertising communications.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny about that? When I was receiving my MBA, really there was three primary career paths: management consulting, banking, and brand management. So for anybody that wanted to angle into the marketing function, a lot of the work was presented as being a brand manager, owning a P&L, which was extremely attractive. I just had this perception, though, that to get into that arena, you had to have a creative bug, a creative interest, and a creative mind. And I was coming from a technology background before my MBA. So, the aha moment for me was I went to Experian after I graduated and got my MBA. I was involved in a rotational program where I did strategy work for our global strategy team, our government team, our operations team. And honestly, what was interesting is it didn't really work out. The goal was to transition you into a full-time role at Experian in their credit services division. But that led me to actually look at Experian's marketing services division. And back then, email marketing was just becoming a really big thing that was making companies a lot of money. And I found it was a great fit for myself because it was the intersection of customer data, databases, and how that can influence creative with marketing messages, experience management. And so I think it's funny. I went to get my MBA to get out of technology and data, but then I found myself back into sort of a similar type of role, but with a lens of looking at how to improve marketing experiences versus just technology systems and operations.
Interesting. Yeah, I also, after my MBA, I was pursuing careers in management consulting, but then I was drawn more towards marketing, branding, and communications as well. So you are the VP of Audience Intelligence at RPA. Tell us, what is audience intelligence?
Yeah. It's funny, we talk a lot about it here because the acronym is AI. So not to be confused with artificial intelligence, which is a very buzzword, very cliche term right now. So audience intelligence with us, it bore out of a gap that clients we work with have where once an advertising or media plan is set up to promote a product, a new model launch, or so on and so forth, the activities of trying to find consistent audiences to target across all of the digital channels that you can think of, all of the offline channels, like trying to reach the same people within television, radio, direct mail. It was a very disjointed and fragmented process. So the impetus with creating this group was a centralized subject matter expertise type group that could streamline the audience development and also audience activation if you have a goal of trying to reach the same audiences with your campaigns that you set up. So that was the impetus behind creating this centralized audience team. The way that it's evolved now, though, is on top of what I would like to call kind of the tail end of campaign planning, which is trying to find the right audiences, sizing them to make sure you can reach your scale and business objectives with like sales targets. We also use data that we have access to inform strategy and planning as well too. So, the four kind of quadrants that I kind of break down what we call our audience research and discovery process are demographic traits, media consumption traits. So what types of media platforms are people consuming, advertising, and just content in general? Attitudinal traits, and then also motivational traits. Like what are the motivators for people to purchase a particular project or a particular product? And so now we're getting to a point, we're definitely not there, but we're trying to transition into being a part of media strategy or just our general strategy teams and providing inputs into media strategy, which essentially is how to distribute dollars and investments across channels to promote a product, as well as creative strategy as well too. Our point of view is we feel, especially with these attitudinal and motivational type traits, that can be used as an input into how to set up creative direction, creative design from either a tonal perspective, from a family structure perspective, like what types of concepts should you have in your ads or your imagery. So that's the way we're trying to approach it right now. And to me, both pieces are important, but we're trying to put a lot of investment in time on how we can intersect more with media and creative strategy.
Can you give me an example of how this new strategy or this thrust into this area is going to benefit your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally, I haven't worked as a creative or worked on a creative team. There's a lot of research that goes into what the optimal creative design should be for how you want to set up I'll speak in terms of video since it's the most kind of interactive and where we spend the majority of our time here at RPA. A lot of the decisions are based off of past performance, types of concepts that have performed well in the past, market research, competitor research, looking at what, your competitors are doing. And then, a lot of times from what I've observed is leadership in organizations, they'll have aspirations of who they want to connect with creative spots. And so they'll want to angle their creative towards, who they want to connect with. So with a big auto client that we work with, they're constantly trying to connect more with the millennial population, the more multicultural populations. And so that's driving a lot of the creative direction and creative design. So, which is good to some extent, but our philosophy is if you can get access to your current customers or past customers and try to look at that data and see what types of lifestyle, behavioral, attitudinal traits kind of over-index for people who have actually transacted with you, that should be used as a minimum as an input into your creative design and creative direction. So that's essentially kind of how we're trying to intersect more with that upfront kind of design process.
And your intelligence, what's the balance you strike between quantitative and qualitative?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of, honestly, in terms of effort and in terms of kind of work output for the team, it's probably a balance of about 40% qualitative, 60% quantitative, because at the end of the day, a lot of the work that my team does is around finding these audiences with the technologies and tools that we have access to. And to keep it simple, a client may have a target to drive 1 million website visits. And so based off of historical data and, past engagement via different media channels, like we basically have to make sure that we can size our audiences the right ways so that we can meet these upfront objectives that clients set. And so honestly, by the nature of just all of the work involved with the different platforms we work with, onboarding tools like LiveRamp, CDPs, DMPs, and then different data sources, it takes a lot of time to find these audiences, stitch them together, and then size them to make sure we're going to meet the objectives that clients have. So it's about a 40-60 split. I'd like to see it reversed at some point, but that's kind of how we're operating right now.
But it's also a focus on being more customer centric, isn't that correct?
Yeah. So, part of this as well too is, I've been speaking kind of broadly about how we try to inform creative strategy, media strategy, but taking it down a level with a couple of our clients, we're working with them to formulate different types of customer segments and segmentation. And this is kind of tapping into my CRM background. I used to run email and loyalty programs for a couple of companies like the Books, an e-commerce flower company, Allergan. They're in the aesthetic space, and the concept of personalization is much more prevalent in the CRM space. And honestly, that's because you have a lot more data. It's a little bit easier to put those types of rules in market with email platforms, marketing automation platforms. But we're trying to bring that type of philosophy and thinking to advertising, where it's a little more difficult because it's more difficult to create 10 different versions of a video because you have to reshoot, find different actors to align with the logic or the rules that you put in place. But we're trying to see how we can influence small iterations here and there. And then with digital, and when you're just working with kind of imagery, there's platforms like DCO, dynamic creative optimization, and we're trying to figure out a way that we can inject more of the learnings we have about the audience into how different creative variations should be structured, so that it's more not necessarily a one-to-one connection with how we communicate, but at a segment level or a persona level of aligning the messaging with the consumers we're trying to connect with.
How many of the brands that you work with actually are customer centric enough, or do you find that you often have to, help them become more and more customer centric?
Yeah, the answer is, and I want to answer this diplomatically, is I think a lot of the clients would agree. Lots of effort. Everybody knows it's where they need to go, but nobody's completely there yet. And then when you layer in, because when I think of customer centricity, I don't just think of outbound advertising, direct marketing, where you're proactively trying to communicate with customers. I also think about it from an inbound experience management perspective. So customer service interactions with calls, in auto service experiences when you're trying to get a tire fixed or your oil changed or something like that. And getting to a mode of where it's an omni-channel experience, where it's kind of the same experience across all of these touch points. I think some organizations are definitely they have some have the planning, some made the investments to get the strategic thinking in line. I think the transitioning to the executional component is a major challenge, because it's a combination of getting the right resources, the right dollars to invest if you need different types of tools and technologies to realize this type of vision. But it's also changing the mode of thinking of your leadership and your people that are actually going to help you to realize this vision. Because on top of just making these adjustments to become more omni-channel, it's also an exercise in changing potentially your KPIs or your measurements of success for your different employees and their different functions. So I think that those are just some of the roadblocks. A lot of people definitely have a big emphasis on improving this, but it's something that nobody's gonna be there 100% anytime soon. Yeah.
So it sounds like a big challenge is the mindset. And have you found a way to help convince brands to go down this path more in terms of shifting their mindset?
Yeah, it's a lot of different approaches to get at that. I think for a lot of the leaders, especially people in media and advertising, I think showing visuals or visualizations of how you can adjust different experiences, and then showing the data behind why you're adjusting a different personalized message, either creative or copy or whatnot. I've seen that that's helped people to start to buy in. I think also, another big approach that I'm a fan of is just always being in a mode of testing new things, because I think from, what I've found, whether it's a large organization or a small, even if you have a 3-year vision, you can't just get there overnight. You got to continually iterate with small tests and small adjustments, and then prove out those small wins to help get you to your ultimate, 3-year path or 3-year vision or whatnot. So I think constantly, the way that my team approaches it is every time we're planning for a new campaign or a new major effort, we're constantly trying to introduce at least 3 to 5 new tests that start to get them more in the personalization, targeted marketing with creative type of mindset. And so it's not just testing, but then also closing the feedback loop and showing the results to show that why they were good ideas too.
So clearly, audience intelligence really can drive business outcomes from what you've seen. It's a matter of experimenting and trying different things, but it really can lead to business outcomes of growth and other objectives. Correct?
Yeah, definitely. It's again, it's not just if you want to try to retarget site visitors, just trying to find people that visited the site previously. Like we're looking at signals that are giving us leading indicators of who's going to visit your site, who's going to perform lower funnel actions, who's going to do price comparisons and things of that nature. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and we look at first party data, second party data, third party data. So we're looking at a bunch of different signals to make these decisions on who to target.
So now it sounds like you want to take this intelligence to even try different messaging based on this intelligence to be more targeted. That's the area you want to go more into. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of untapped potential in that arena, and I just not to kind of repeat myself, but I think I'm really fascinated with the TV space right now, because as I'm sure your listeners are aware, there's a big shift with traditional broadcast television viewership, and people are cutting the cord. They're streaming more. They're using, they're streaming live TV on platforms like YouTube TV, Hulu live TV. But then, some are only watching, Hulu, HBO Max, Netflix, things of that nature. So it just makes it a lot more challenging to reach those large masses through television, as opposed to in the past. But there's a lot of new capabilities from a technology standpoint to find these really specific niche audiences through these streaming, data-driven, connected TV platforms to target the right people and with the right message. So, and then there's also some other players that are popping up that I haven't worked with a lot specifically, but they're claiming they can help you with content creation in a quicker fashion to create more of these variations that I was alluding to before. So to me, it's a really exciting space, because that, and honestly, it's interesting enough too. It's a great bridge with some of our more legacy employees at RPA, because a lot of these people grew up on broadcast TV and direct mail. When you think about advertising 30 years ago,
sure.
And now it's just so fragmented between digital and all of these other different TV mechanisms that it's a way that we can kind of connect, because they love TV as a channel, but it's bringing a data-driven approach.
And what type of role have you seen that audience intelligence plays in terms of optimizing the experience for customers? And do you have an example of that where some audience intelligence really led to enhancing the experience as well?
Yeah, there's a couple of examples to speak to, but I think one that always will stand out with me is actually in a prior life when I worked at the Books company. I think I mentioned it before, but an online e-commerce floral company. So to give some context, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day are what we would call our two Super Bowl moments for the company. They accounted for 60 to 70% of yearly revenue in the floral space in general. I might be outdated with those figures, but I think it's around 60 to 80% or whatnot. And this was for Mother's Day. So we had a CDP, a customer data platform, and one of the capabilities that we took advantage of was we were able to bucket our customers into different lifetime value quadrants. It was platinum was kind of the highest, bronze was kind of the lowest characterization, and so what we did is we injected those lifetime value segments into our customer service platform, which was Zendesk at the time. And a big thing with these two holidays is ensuring that deliveries are delivered to the recipients on time. That's the number one activity that can be a deterrent to lead a customer to choose a competitor and shop somewhere else for a future holiday for flowers. So, I heard this anecdotally, but my team partnered with our customer service team. We bought in all of this data so that the idea was, as they were servicing customer service inquiries through our online mechanisms, that they could see these classifications of customers as they were servicing. And the intent was that could dictate the urgency with how they responded to these requests, right? So I found out, anecdotally, so for those that are aware of Shark Tank and the Sharks, Barbara Corcoran was actually one of our big customers. And her delivery was actually going to be delayed by 2 or 3 days. But one of our customer service reps, he spotted it 4 or 5 days in advance of Mother's Day. And he basically communicated with our operations team to prioritize, her delivery and her order. And, long story short, we were able to prioritize her order over others to make sure the flowers were delivered on time. So I think that was, I hear anecdotes a lot of people that run these large loyalty programs and the concept of, ensuring you're treating your best customers the right way. And not to say you're not going to treat your other customers, but just prioritizing your resources to make sure that they stay happy. And that was a great example that I witnessed firsthand where, she was happy, kept buying from Books afterwards. So
that's good. What are some common mistakes you find that brands do when it comes to audience intelligence?
I think that I'll answer it in kind of two ways. I think you have some brands that are too reliant on data, where they don't take the time to think through if an insight is practical and makes sense. But then I also think there's other scenarios where brands they spend too much time thinking about what's practical, what makes sense, and don't listen to the data. And so, actually, I'll not steal, but I'll piggyback off of an example that I'm reading in a book right now. Neil Hoyne is a good friend of mine. He's got a book out right now where he talks about this concept of the right way to basically do customer data-driven marketing. And I've actually seen this with a couple of brands that I've worked with too, is especially when you're in the early stages of growth. It's great to come up with a lifetime value calculation for, your customers. And the importance of that is that you can back into what are your spend levels that you can tolerate to make sure that you're going to be profitable, that unit economics are going to make sense, that you can reinvest more money back into the company. And the problem with an example he cited is it was in year 2 or 3, they thought the average lifetime value was about $550. And so based off of that, they thought they could spend $200 or so to acquire new customers. But the problem was that it was an inaccurate calculation. They had a couple of outlier customers that skewed that average lifetime value bucket. So then they ended up overspending and then just ended up not being profitable. I'll give you another example too. I actually was just chatting about this with Eli Winkler. He used to be the CMO at Lazy Boy, the furniture company.
Mhm.
So they sell couches, they sell ottomans, they sell like tables and lamps and just a lot of accessories for your living room. Um, they had some data that suggested that people that bought ottomans might potentially want to buy other furniture accessories for a living room. But when they put in tests to try to cross sell these other products, they just didn't find that the take rate just wasn't there. And taking a step back, a big thing that me and him were chatting about was, a person that is buying an ottoman, they may already have their living room set up. They're just looking for that last piece to make it, whole and feel comfortable, as opposed to somebody that has just bought a couch. They're going to be more apt to fill the rest of their living room with the other accessories, and they might be more apt to want to entertain more people as well too, versus that other person that bought the ottoman. So it was a really good example where some of the data may have shown something different, but like taking a step back and thinking through what's practical, they found the couch buyers were more ripe for cross sales than the ottoman buyers.
Interesting. I think it's a great example of sometimes relying too much on data in terms of what people are doing isn't enough of the story, right? You need to go behind the context and really understand that. And that requires some qualitative, I think, to ensure that the data, the way you're interpreting, is actually what buyers are being motivated or driven by.
Yeah, definitely. It's a constant conversation for us. One of the tricky things we get into is we try to figure out the right way to message multicultural audiences, and we'll find data that'll say, these people are gamers, these like gambling, and the data may say one thing, but we constantly have conversations to think about like what's practical, how does it mesh with other research and things of that nature. So,
is there one best practice you wish more brands would be doing?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. A lot of ways to to answer that. I think and this is biased because of my background, but I spent 6-7 years focused in CRM. I've now worked in advertising for 1 to 2 years, and I still don't know why these two worlds just don't connect more, and why all of the learnings and insights that a CRM or a customer marketing organization can't funnel back into the advertisers. Like, it's still a mystery to me, like why there's not more of a connection on that front. And this isn't even counting the service part of organizations, customer, contact centers and things like that. Like why there's these disconnects. I understand some of the barriers, especially if you're a large organization. You have different leadership with each group. You have different goals, different objectives. But I just, that's always been one of the biggest mysteries to me, because I think you're missing out on a lot of opportunity, especially on the advertising side, if you're not tapping into your customer data to align on like what outbound messaging offers, creative strategies can help acquire the right customers for you versus just mass customers. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because that's the front line, right? And that's where you're getting real-time feedback and input from customers at that level. And if you can incorporate that in terms of your overall intelligence, that would make a big difference for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you see on the horizon that will impact, do you think, the way marketers approach audience intelligence?
I think because with the explosion of channels, with the pure explosion of content, just content that's available to consume, more attention towards how you can cut through the clutter to connect with your customers and connect with prospective shoppers is going to be just so much more important than in the past. I think, there's some business categories where they're very offer driven, price driven, where that's always going to be a play. But I think how brands think about interacting with their customers and with prospective shoppers through, whether it's through video, whether it's through grassroots events at physical locations, I think that's going to be a big thing. one other thing that I'll touch on, and partially a plug for Place IQ, who I mentioned earlier. I hosted their SVP of strategy. One interesting thing that they've been looking at too is being able, when you think about COVID, and locations are starting to open up more now with COVID, but you still have a certain facet of individuals that are going to prefer online shopping, online interactions, and those types of experiences versus in-person experiences. And I think the more that you can detect those preference types for customers and then speak to them with that recognition, where it's going to be a better experience for them, tailored to how they want to shop and interact with you, that's going to be something that's going to be here to stay. Even as we're easing back off the restrictions, and more, at least here in the US, more and more locations are opening up. I think that's going to be incredibly important in the next 5-10 years or so.
So I think you're talking about even customizing it further, the online experience for those who prefer that method of interaction, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
What area of marketing or marketing intelligence would you like to delve into further, and why?
I touched on this earlier. Television is a big arena. I think. Television again. How do the intersection of data and creating niche audiences and then finding them through these different television outlets is something that's going to be super interesting. Another area for myself, I guess a little broader than marketing, that's really fascinating me, is how audience intelligence can become an input into content creation in general. And I guess, I live out here in Los Angeles, the entertainment capital of the world. And, we have all these studios and these mechanisms where film, television are produced. And I feel like the thought of diving into what types of content and what behaviors certain audiences exhibit, and then using that as a feedback loop into as inputs into what types of new shows, movies, and content should be created. I think Netflix is well known for being really good at this, but I feel like with a lot of the other streaming platforms, it's because I've asked this question to people that work at those places, and it's not necessarily connected. Part of that's driven by these content creators, these directors, these producers. They have their visions of what's going to be great content, but I think using past audience data, audience intel as major inputs into that will be something that will be interesting to kind of follow in the future.
Interesting. Who in the world of marketing would you love to have, or even market intelligence, would you love to have lunch with, and why?
Yeah, I honestly, actually, a guy that I met about 4 or 5 years ago. His name is Chris Stadler, and so a long time ago, I actually interviewed for a CRM role at Ironman, the main organizer of triathlon events, internationally. And what was impressive about him is he was the CMO at Ironman. They had a great campaign at the time. I think it was Anything is Possible. They had these really inspirational videos of the athletes training. And I don't do Ironman, or I only did a half Ironman, but I'm less involved. But it was just really, really connected with me at the time when I was talking with them. But he actually also used to be the CMO of Equinox, which is a major chain of gym brands out here. I believe they're only in the US, and they just have, I'm just really, number one, I've been a member there since 2013, so almost 10 years. They're on the premium end of the gym membership spectrum. And I've never wavered in my membership, but they just do a really good job connecting with their users. They got a great mobile app. It's proactive with recommending classes, nutritional advice for you. They've had some really interesting campaigns. Equinox Made Me Do It was a real popular one. Equinox's Life was another major one that really resonated with a lot of the members. And then it also goes down to the experience at the gyms themselves. They're always really clean, top of the line, amenities, showers. And Chris is a guy, I had a brief chat with him. It was in an interview mode, but I would just love to pick his brain more about, his thought process around development of some of those campaigns, how they, lived out those thoughts and the strategies, like how they actually put it in market and put it in place. Because I thought both brands did a great job of what they tried their missions or tried to dictate what their missions would be. So
interesting. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. It was really been, and I enjoyed it and learning more about market intelligence and, what could be done better as well as what's on the horizon. So I want to thank you very much, Phil, for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. And hopefully the audience learned a thing or two here. I was trying, so we'll see.
I think a good conversation like this, there's always something to be gleaned from it. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.